Thank you. So as David mentioned, I'm Caroline Barrett. I'm Program Manager for Traceability at Agriculture Victoria, but I am here today as a representative of the National PIC or Property Identification Working Group, which represents all jurisdictions and is chaired by Commonwealth. So I want to talk today about plant property identification or PPID for Australia. As an introduction, the Australian plant industry is a large industry. It contributes over $30 billion annually to Australian agriculture. So this industry is at the heart of what we're trying to protect and build through this scheme. Traceability is really vital to plant industries. There are many drivers for traceability: biosecurity, which is diseases of plants; food safety, which is where diseases pass through plants and affect animals or people; in responses to emergencies, bushfires and different types of natural disasters; and also ensuring market access and supply chain efficiencies. So I'm just going to talk about one case study in relation to biosecurity to try and illustrate these drivers. So biosecurity, these disease outbreaks threaten our food sources and we need to be constantly vigilant about them. And a really good example of this is the citrus canker outbreak of 2018. So citrus canker is a disease which is normally not found in Australia, and we had an outbreak of it in 2018 that threatened our citrus industry. Australian citrus industry is worth 850 million per annum revenue, so it's a large industry, and it has over 1,000 growers in 5 states. So I put together this slide, interestingly, just before COVID outbreak happened. And at that time, I think not a lot of people generally thought about tracing on a day-to-day basis, but now everyone thinks about tracing on a day-to-day basis. So I think the silver lining of COVID is we really understand the challenges of traceability a lot better now. So in this slide, I'd just like to say thank you to Northern Territory Government and Citrus Australia who helped in putting this data together. On the left there, in 2017 in Darwin in Northern Territory, there was likely importation into a nursery, retailer and wholesaler of infected limes, so infected lime plants. And in 2018, during routine surveillance of the nursery, there was detection of citrus canker disease, and this was confirmed through laboratory testing. So at this point, tracing was commenced. At the nursery, they found 9 infected batches of these plants, and that was a total of 981 plants. And there were different types of host plants infected by this point. So it extended to limes, grapefruit, lemons, and mandarin. These plants had been mixed with other potential host plants, and so this gave a total of 4,658 at-risk host plants. Now, these at-risk host plants have been sold to multiple other locations, including other nurseries, hobby farms, and homeowners. Happily, none had been sold to commercial citrus growers. And you can see on the map here where all of those at-risk host plants had been distributed to. So the Northern Territory and WA detected citrus canker disease in both of their jurisdictions. They had 9,653 properties that they had to survey, which was a massive exercise that extended over many months. And that ended up in over 13,000 plants being destroyed. And it took them 2 to 3 years to regain their evidence of freedom status. Happily, South Australia, New South Wales and Queensland did not have disease detected in their states. And I think this example clearly illustrated how lack of plant property location knowledge can severely hamper tracing and disease alerts, and why it's so vital. What is the Plant Property Identification Program all about? What's happening? So Australian federal and state and territory governments are exploring future implementation of location identification system for plant businesses, which is the Plant Property Identification, or PPID. And this was previously discussed as plant PICs in years past. There is a livestock system, or livestock PICs, already established, and this could provide the default model for plants. However, an alternative model based on the GS1 ISO standards is the model that's under consideration. And this model would utilize the use of the GLNs, or the global location numbers, as the location identifiers, the National Location Registry as the database solution, and it would achieve a nationally harmonized data model and would leverage industry's use of GTINs as the product identifier, so bringing together that linkage between place and product. And what would it mean for government and industry if we had this model in place? So the potential advantages would include building on GS1's wide adoption within retail, freight, and healthcare sectors, which have already been discussed today, empowering our green life, so our nursery production and our plant food supply chains, achieving a nationally and an internationally harmonized approach to plant business location identification, forming the bedrock for traceability by implementing data standards that are system agnostic. And we've already had comments today about how important it is to have those data standards in place within software systems. It would help improve our recall processes, and it could position Australian government and industry as global leaders in biosecurity, food safety, and market access. So the process steps that we've been going through, we've done a discovery phase and completed that report back in November 2020. We've had the pilot scheme endorsed by the National Biosecurity Committee, and Commonwealth and GS1 have set up now a contract with cost share arrangements for a pilot across all jurisdictions, and the pilot is now live. So we're running that between October 2021 and June 2022. So this slide, I think, explains in a nutshell what we're trying to achieve here. You can see the supply chain that runs from left to right, and the location identifiers, which are called global location numbers, which are relevant to all businesses in the supply chain. And these are being used already heavily in businesses from kind of processors right through to retailers. So essentially what we're doing is using the global location number for primary producers as well, and linking them up with the same standards as the rest of the supply chain. As a kind of bonus feature, which is a major bonus feature, we've also got product identification. So we've got stickering on lots of different plant products, both in the food and the green life space, which already uses GS1 standards and the GTIN numbering system. And so this brings together that linkage between product place and, place of production and also the product itself. And I think we're hoping that by using this harmonized system that links in with freight and the rest of the supply chain, that this will just drive compliance through kind of natural everyday business interactions, and it will help harmonize the system. We will need to collect some data within the pilot, and we've surveyed all jurisdictions about what data is required. You can see the data there on the left. It's fairly straightforward. The applicant, the property owner and farm manager, the ability to have some interactive mapping, so clicking on property boundaries that outline the position of the farm, possibly some optional extra functionality around locating key building assets. So when we're responding to fires and things like that, we know where high value sites are. Identifying which crop types are grown, and also linking in with other data such as pre-existing livestock PICs, pre-existing plant PICs. There aren't many of those, but there are a few in Victoria. And also if they've got GS1 registration already, linking in with that, and then having some form of legal authorization. And we have kind of investigated the GLN capability to have parent and child numbering systems, which enables us to have lots of flexibility. Many properties are dispersed or large or not present within the same state, and having this kind of parent and child flexibility within numbering gives us lots of options about how to link these properties together. So the information will be stored within the National Location Registry. Over on the left there, we've got data providers who will be producers and processors involved in the pilot. They will link the information into the National Location Registry, and then ultimately we would have data recipients who would be people given access, controlled access, such as government, freight partners, and retail partners. And if I could have the next slide, please. And this slide here kind of just illustrates the process in a little bit more detail. So over on the left there, a company would apply, they would submit their data, which could be verified by states and territory jurisdictions. It could then be passed on to GS1, who could allocate them a GLN number, and all of that data and the GLN number would then sit within the registry, and then controlled access would be given to various partners. So states and territory jurisdictions could have mirroring databases and use that data for emergency response functions, mapping, etc. The company themselves obviously would have access to the data, and they could use it in their inventory and supply management. And they might also nominate certain supply chain partners to have access, such as freight and logistics companies, etc. So we have approached, and we're working with, in the early stages, various pilot participants from the nursery, citrus, melons, and onions industries, who would take part by updating some of, uploading some of their data into the trial, and so we can kind of iron out the kinks and work out what sort of system would work best within this pilot. And we're also really grateful to have the participation of retailers, Woolworths and Bunnings, Plant Health Australia, and Commonwealth Government has obviously set up the contract, and representatives from the National PIC Working Group are present as well in the pilot. One question that quite often comes up, so just wanted to address this, was around data privacy. GS1 Australia obviously has a privacy policy, and Marcel, if you'd just like to talk to this slide, that would be helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Caroline. And I know that within the conversation taking place in the meeting, that question has already been raised, so it's worthwhile addressing it up front. Listen, I guess the foundational premise is this: the location owner, whether it be a farmer, whether it be a retailer, whether it be a manufacturing company or a transport company, they have the control as to who they want to share the data with, and that control ownership is already available within the National Location Registry. So the intent is not to create a registry that is completely open to the public. That is not the intent. It's simply to enable the locations owners to be able to meet the different requirements through one platform, while still being very much in control as to who they share the data with. And so that's part of what the pilot project is going to be looking at, and what additional requirements we will need to put in place for that. Above and beyond that, I guess, GS1 Australia has been entrusted by industry to operate a number of registries, whether it be about location data, about product data, or about recall data, for example. And obviously we take the privacy and the security aspects of that very seriously. So there are not only extensive policies, but also systems in place that get audited not only by us, but by third parties, to ensure that all of the right measures are in place to protect data in the registries that we operate on behalf of industry.
Thank you very much, Marcel. So just finally, what will happen after the PPID pilot? So in June 2022, the report will be submitted to the National PIC Working Group and the National Biosecurity Committee for endorsement, and depending on those results, there would then be consideration for future implementation. And I think that's my final slide. So thank you very much.